Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. It's January 1st, 2025, and, well, we're kicking off the year with kind of a meta question. As you're maybe still sweeping up confetti, did you ever wonder, why is January 1st the new year? Like, does that really make sense?
It's funny, isn't it? We just take it for granted, but it's a question most of us never actually stop to consider.
Right. But once you do think about it, it opens up all these fascinating questions about history and culture and, well, maybe even a little bit about, like, the human need to try and control time itself.
Absolutely. There's a lot more to it than meets the eye.
Like, honestly, spring equinox has always felt more like a fresh start to me, personally.
Right.
Nature's rebooting, days are getting longer.
Yep.
But here we are, toasting on a date that seems, I don't know, kind of random.
And that's the beauty of this deep dive, right? We're going to dig into sources that explain how January 1st came to dominate the calendar. And it's a wild ride, let me tell you. Plus, we'll take a look at some cultures that do start the year in sync with nature, which might make you rethink everything you thought you knew about New Year's.
Totally. Okay, so to get us started, I think it's important to point out, most of the world runs on the Gregorian calendar, so this is 2025. But that's just one system, right? Like, there are others out there.
Exactly. The Gregorian calendar, named after Pope Gregory III, who instituted it back in the 1500s, it's widespread, but it's honestly pretty recent in the grand scheme of things. There are places like, say, Iran and Afghanistan. They're entering the year 1401, following their solar Hijri calendar.
Hold on, 1401, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, it really makes you realize, like, our concept of what year it is like a construct, a way of organizing time that differs across cultures.
Yeah.
And it gets even wilder. I mean, consider Nepal. They follow the Vikram Samvat calendar. They're already in the year 2079.
Wait, so someone could be living in 2079 while I'm stuck here in 2025.
Yeah.
I mean, time travel's real, apparently. But okay, jokes aside, why do so many cultures gravitate towards a spring start for the new year? It just feels, I don't know, natural?
Right. Think about it. The spring equinox, usually around March 21st, marks this time of rebirth and renewal in nature. Days and nights are equal, and for ancient agrarian societies, it was like the crucial point in the agricultural cycle. Makes sense to tie new beginnings to the natural world waking up, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And one of our sources even argues that the vernal equinox, or whatever you want to call it, it has this deep symbolic resonance, like a time of balance, new potential. Lots of ancient cultures celebrated it. It wasn't just planting crops. It was reflecting and celebrating and connecting with the rhythms of, well, the universe, basically.
Exactly. And some cultures still celebrate their new year around this time. Nowruz, for example, is a huge holiday in Iran, coincides with the spring equinox, marks the start of their new year. It's a vibrant celebration of life and new beginnings, full of symbolism and tradition.
So, if spring makes so much sense, how did we end up with January 1st? I mean, last time I checked, the world doesn't exactly burst into bloom on New Year's Day. You know what I mean?
Right. And that's where our deep dive takes this fascinating turn. The story leads us back to ancient Rome, a civilization known for its complex history and its surprisingly messy relationship with calendars.
Okay, I am here for some Roman calendar chaos. Bring it on.
Oh, it's good stuff. So it all started with a 10-month lunar system. And get this, they completely ignored the winter months. Just pretended those cold, dark months didn't exist.
Maybe they were just like really optimistic people, Hey, winter's just a minor blip. Let's get back to the good stuff.
Maybe. But eventually they did add January and February, realizing those months were, well, kind of unavoidable.
Yeah, tough to just ignore winter forever, I guess.
But even with a 12-month system, the Roman calendar was far from stable.
And why is that? Did the Roman emperors just hate having a consistent schedule or something?
You're closer than you think. Let's just say the Roman emperors had a habit of adjusting the calendar for political gain, shall we say. Imagine, like, having the power to literally manipulate time itself.
Whoa. Talk about controlling the narrative.
Yeah.
They could make their reign seem longer or schedule, like, important events to coincide with auspicious dates. It's like the ultimate PR stunt.
Exactly. It shows how calendars, even though we think of them as these neutral things to track time, have always been wrapped up in power and politics. And Julius Caesar, well, he was a master of that game.
Of course he was. Always one for a grand gesture. So did he have something to do with our January 1st New Year then?
He did. In 45 BCE, Caesar decides to shift the start of the year to January 1st, partly to align with the festival of Janus, this two-faced Roman god representing beginnings and endings.
So our New Year's Eve parties are basically rooted in ancient Roman festivities. Some things never change, I guess.
Indeed. But even with Caesar's decree, the transition wasn't immediate or universal. People were used to celebrating new beginnings in spring, and that connection to nature wasn't easily erased. And then, as Christianity gained influence, well, things took another unexpected turn.
Ooh, I have a feeling this is where it gets really interesting. The clash of traditions, power dynamics. It's like a historical drama unfolding.
You could say that. Early Christians actually viewed the Roman New Year celebrations as pagan and associated them with idolatry. This conflict sets the stage for a whole new chapter in the story of New Year's and its date.
So did the early church, like, abolish the New Year altogether? I mean, like, hard to imagine life without it.
Not quite. In 567 CE, the Council of Tours, a gathering of church leaders, they decided to move the New Year back to March 25th. It was a strategic move, trying to distance the celebration from its pagan roots, align it with the Feast of the Annunciation, a key event in the Christian calendar.
Wow. It's amazing how these power struggles, these ideological shifts, shape something as, like, basic as how we mark a new year.
It really is. But even with this shift, the story wasn't over. The stage was set for another major player to enter the scene, one who would leave a lasting mark on our calendars. Pope Gregory the Third.
And that's where our January 1st New Year finally makes its grand entrance.
Right. You got it. But to understand how that happened, we got to delve into the complexities of calendar reform and the challenges of reconciling lunar cycles, solar years, religious traditions. And trust me, it's a story that might make you question how much control we actually have over time itself.
Okay, I am officially hooked. This is way more complex and interesting than I ever imagined. Stay tuned, listeners, as we continue our deep dive into the history of the new year and explore those alternative calendars that might just inspire you to rethink your own sense of time.
So yeah, we're left with this puzzle, right? Spring equinox totally makes sense, but January 1st is like the king of New Year's. To get why Pope Gregory went this route, though, we got to understand the mess he was trying to clean up.
Yeah, from what I've read, calendars back then weren't exactly precise. Like, were they always falling out of sync with the seasons?
Exactly. The Julian calendar, the one they were using before Gregory came along, it had a slight miscalculation. They were treating the solar year as 365.25 days. But in reality, it's a tiny bit shorter.
Okay, so a tiny fraction of a day off. Doesn't seem like a huge deal, right? What's the worst that could happen?
Well, see, over centuries, that tiny bit adds up. By the 16th century, the Julian calendar was out of whack by about 10 days. The spring equinox, supposed to be March 21st, was happening around March 11th.
Wow, that's a pretty big drift. I can see how that would throw things off, especially for, like, religious holidays tied to the solar calendar.
Exactly. Easter, for example. Its date was determined by the spring equinox, and this discrepancy was causing all sorts of problems for the church. So in comes Pope Gregory III, determined to, well, set the calendar straight, literally and figuratively.
I love it. He's like, time to fix this mess and put the calendar back on track. But how did that lead us back to January 1st?
It wasn't quite as deliberate as you might think. Gregory's team, all these astronomers and mathematicians, they came up with a solution. Skip 10 days to get back in sync with the solar year. Just like that, October 4th, 1582 was immediately followed by October 15th.
Whoa, time warp. Can you imagine waking up and realizing you'd lost 10 days? I wonder how people back then reacted to that.
It must have been pretty weird, to say the least.
Right.
But anyway, this calendar overhaul, what we call the Gregorian reform, it was a huge accomplishment. Created a system that's super accurate, and, well, we're still using it today.
Okay, but still haven't solved the January 1st New Year mystery. Was that part of Gregory's plan, too?
And not really. His main thing was fixing the solar year alignment, but the reform did kind of reinforce the existing tradition of celebrating New Year's on January 1st, something that had roots in Roman times, but had been followed inconsistently throughout the Middle Ages.
So it's like a combo of historical coincidence and needing a standard global date. It's kind of wild to realize how much history and tradition are baked into our lives, even something as basic as when we celebrate New Year's.
Absolutely. But let's not forget those cultures that do celebrate on a different day, in sync with nature. Remember the Iranian New Year, Nowruz?
Oh, yeah, with the spring equinox.
Right. It's not just about spring. It's a time for renewal, reflection, connecting with family and friends. They have these festivities that last for 13 days, incorporating ancient traditions and all these symbolic rituals.
Sounds beautiful and meaningful. Yeah, it makes me think maybe New Year's is about more than just a calendar date. Like maybe it's about the values and intentions we bring to it, the connections we make, the hopes we have for the future.
Couldn't agree more. And speaking of different ways of marking time, let's circle back to those other calendar systems we talked about earlier. Remember how Nepal is already in the year 2079?
Yeah, 2079. That was the one that really blew my mind.
Well, their Vikram Samvat calendar. It's a fascinating example of a lunisolar system.
Lunisolar. That sounds complicated.
It's actually really clever. Basically, it brings together the lunar cycles and the solar year. So lunar months are based on the phases of the moon, but they don't quite match up with the solar year, the time it takes for the Earth to orbit the sun, right?
Right.
So lunisolar calendar, it makes adjustments to keep those lunar months in sync with the seasons.
So it's like this delicate balancing act, keeping two different systems in harmony with each other.
Exactly. And it reflects that deep connection between human cultures and the celestial cycles that, well, kind of govern our lives. And speaking of celestial cycles, let's jump over to Ethiopia. They have a unique 13-month calendar.
Wait, a 13th month? That's definitely a different way of slicing up a year. How does that work?
So every month has 30 days, and then they add a 13th month called Pagum, which has either 5 or 6 days, depending on if it's a leap year or not. And here's the interesting part. Their calendar is about 7 years behind the Gregorian one, so they're actually in the year 2018 right now.
It's incredible how these different systems offer these totally different perspectives on time, and it makes you realize how much our calendar shapes our whole perception of the world and how time passes.
Absolutely, and it challenges the idea that there's only one right way to measure time. These diverse calendar systems show the richness and complexity of human culture and how different societies have tried to connect with nature, with their history, with their beliefs.
This whole deep dive has been a real eye-opener, I gotta say. It's not just about learning historical facts, it's like understanding how these different approaches to time reflect different ways of thinking and being in the world.
Well said. And I think that's what makes this topic so fascinating, right? It's not just about calendars, it's about understanding the different ways we humans have tried to make sense of our place in the cosmos and, well, our relationship with time itself.
So as we raise a glass to 2025, let's remember that while we might be celebrating on January 1st, there are tons of other New Year celebrations happening all throughout the year, each with its own special meaning and importance.
Absolutely. This new year, let's make a resolution to be more aware of all the different ways we experience time and celebrate new beginnings. It's a reminder that there's always more to learn and appreciate about the world around us.
It really is amazing, just exploring something like the New Year, something we all think we know, reveals so much about history, about culture, even about how we as humans relate to time itself.
Yeah, it really makes you question assumptions, appreciate how different everyone's experience can be. Like, who's to say January 1st is the only way to mark a new beginning, right?
Totally. What if each of us got to pick our own personal New Year, a date that meant something special just to us? What would that look like?
Ooh, now that's a cool thought. What if, instead of being tied to the calendar, your new year was linked to, I don't know, a personal milestone, a moment of growth maybe, or even like a natural event that really speaks to you?
I love that. It could be the anniversary of some life-changing decision you made, or like you said, the first day of spring,
Yeah.
or even the night of a meteor shower. Anything that symbolizes a fresh start,
It add a whole new level of meaning to New Year, right? It's not just time passing, it's about choosing a point for renewal, for intention setting.
It's almost like we'd be taking back the power to define our own timelines, create our own rhythms of celebration and reflection.
Exactly. Reminding ourselves that we're not just along for the ride when it comes to time. We can shape how it feels, what it means, create our own rituals and traditions that fit our values, our dreams, all that.
So, as we wrap up this New Year's Day deep dive, let's leave our listeners with a bit of a challenge, maybe. What if we approached every day with that new beginnings feeling?
That's a beautiful thought. Instead of waiting for January 1st to roll around, we can embrace that chance for renewal, for growth every single day.
Yeah, like every sunrise, every new experience, it's a chance to hit the reset button. Learn from yesterday, step into tomorrow with, more purpose.
It's all about cultivating that possibility mindset, that
Yeah.
openness to change, to becoming better. Suddenly, every day has the potential to be a new year.
I love that. Well said. So, listeners, as you step into 2025, and honestly, every day after that, remember, you have the power to make it a year or a day filled with meaning, with purpose, and of course, with joy.
And thank you so much for being with us on this journey of discovery. Hope you found it as enlightening and thought-provoking as we did. Don't forget to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more of these explorations into, well, pretty much anything that sparks curiosity. And hey, leave us a comment below. Let us know what you thought of today's episode.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on the new year, on how we measure time, how we celebrate it, all of it. Until next time, folks, keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep.